March 17, 1943. The crisp, cold air over Rechlin Experimental Airfield in northern Germany carries the guttural roar of 4 Wright Cyclone radial engines, a sound utterly alien to this place. This is the heart of the Luftwaffe's technological brain, a secretive sanctuary where Germany's most advanced aerial weapons are born and its enemies' secrets are mercilessly dissected. But today, the sound echoing across the Mecklenburg forests is not the familiar whine of a Messerschmitt or the drone of a Junkers. It is the deep, resonant thunder of America. In the cockpit of a captured Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, a man sits suspended between professional curiosity and a palpable sense of dread. His name is Hans Werner Lörche, a veteran test pilot whose hands possess an almost supernatural sensitivity to the language of an aircraft. He has flown over 100 different types, from nimble gliders to experimental jets. Yet this machine feels different. It feels foreign. The instrument panel is a constellation of unfamiliar gauges, calibrated in pounds per square inch and feet, not the logical metric system he knows. The throttle quadrant operates in reverse, a small but profound detail that speaks to a fundamentally different engineering philosophy. The yoke feels heavy, solid, connected to a beast of immense size and power. Through the vast plexiglass nose, Lörsch can see the German ground crew watching, their faces a mixture of awe and apprehension. For 3 months, this bomber, once nicknamed Wulfe Hound by its American crew, now bearing the stark black cross of the Luftwaffe, has been a silent enigma in a hangar. Engineers have swarmed over it, photographers have documented its every rivet, and intelligence officers have drafted reports that strain credulity. Now the time for theory is over. Lörsche's mission is to make the beast talk, to force it to reveal the secrets of its power. He pushes the throttles forward. The American engines respond with a surge of raw, confident energy, and the 30-ton bomber begins its journey down the German runway. As the wheels lift, a notation Lörsch made in his logbook just moments before feels less like a technical observation and more like a prophecy. He had written, "The Americans cannot possibly have built thousands of these machines." It was a statement of disbelief, an engineer's rejection of an industrial impossibility. No nation, he believed, could manufacture such complexity on such a massive scale while fighting a global war. But as the fortress climbs effortlessly into the German sky, a chilling counter-thought begins to form in his mind. What if they could? What if this single captured specimen was not an exception, but the rule? This aircraft, and the revelations it would unleash, represents a story far more significant than the capture of a single enemy weapon. It is the story of a nation's hubris, colliding with an industrial reality it could not comprehend. It is the story of how the Third Reich's most elite aviators and engineers, in meticulously studying their enemy's greatest weapon, were forced to confront a terrifying truth: that their own defeat was not just possible, but mathematically inevitable. The B-17 Flying Fortress was more than an airplane. It was a declaration of industrial war, an airborne symbol of a power so vast, so organized, and so relentless that it would grind the German war machine to dust. Our central thesis is this: the detailed analysis of this one captured bomber was more devastating to the Luftwaffe's morale and strategic understanding than any single battlefield defeat. It proved that the war would not be won by superior tactics or the courage of individual pilots, but by the cold, hard calculus of mass production. The fortress in their hands was not just an intelligence prize, it was the ghost of their own future, a future written on the factory floors of a nation they had fatally underestimated. To truly understand the shockwave this single aircraft sent through the German high command, we must first appreciate the perspective of the men who had to face it in the sky. Imagine you are a young Luftwaffe pilot in late 1942. You are an expert, a product of the world's most rigorous flight training program. You fly the Focke-Wulf 190, arguably the finest piston-engine fighter in the world at that time, a machine you know intimately, a machine that responds to your slightest touch. You have been told that the Americans are coming, sending their massive 4-engine bombers, their fliegende Festungen, or flying fortresses, into your skies. But you are not afraid. You are confident. You remember the lessons of 1940, when the Royal Air Force attempted daylight raids and was torn from the sky. Daylight bombing, your commanders assure you, is suicide. Then one day you see them. At first they are just specks in the stratosphere, glittering like shards of ice at 25,000 feet. But as you climb to intercept, the specks resolve into shapes, and the shapes resolve into a formation of breathtaking size and discipline. They are not scattered, not panicked. They fly in a precise geometric pattern, a combat box of 50, 60, perhaps 100 bombers stacked in tiers, each one protecting the other. It is a flying armada, a city of aluminum moving with a single, implacable purpose. You pick your target, a straggler on the edge of the formation, and begin your attack run from the rear, the classic textbook approach. As you close the distance, the bomber swells in your gun sight. And then it happens. The sky itself seems to erupt. What you thought was a single, vulnerable aircraft transforms into a porcupine of fire. Tracers, like incandescent fingers, reach out from the tail, the top turret, the waist, and, most terrifyingly, from a transparent sphere on its belly. They are not the thin lines of rifle-caliber bullets you are used to. These are thick, heavy streams of 50-caliber rounds, each capable of shattering your canopy, tearing through your engine block, or killing you instantly. And it's not just your target that is firing. The bombers to its left, to its right, above it, and below it all turn their guns on you simultaneously. You are no longer attacking one plane. You are attacking the entire formation. You are flying into a storm, a literal wall of tracers that seems to fill the air around you. The sheer volume of fire is a physical and psychological assault. Your training, your instincts, your courage, all are tested in these few frantic seconds. You fire a burst, see pieces fly off the bomber's wing, but it keeps flying. It absorbs the punishment, its defensive fire never slackening. You break away, heart pounding, your aircraft shuddering from the proximity of the defensive barrage. As you bank away, you look back and see the formation, still intact, still disciplined, continuing its journey deeper into the heart of your homeland. You have survived, but a seed of doubt has been planted. The stories, the intelligence reports, they were all wrong. This is not suicide. This is something new, something terrifying. This experience, repeated by hundreds of German fighter pilots, created a legend around the B-17. But for the engineers and strategists on the ground, legend was not enough. They needed facts. They needed to understand the weapon that was challenging their supremacy of the skies. They had seen the wreckage of downed bombers, but twisted metal and shattered components tell an incomplete story. They needed a living specimen, an intact example they could touch, fly, and dissect. They needed to look their enemy in the eye, to understand the mind that had created such a machine. In December of 1942, in a frozen hayfield in occupied France, they would get their wish. An American bomber, crippled but miraculously whole, would fall from the sky and land directly into their hands, and the secrets it would reveal would begin a chain reaction, a domino effect of discovery and dawning horror that would ultimately lead to the very top of the German High Command. The autopsy of the flying fortress was about to begin. To grasp the seismic shock that the B-17 sent through the Luftwaffe, we must first rewind the clock to a time of seemingly unshakable German confidence. In the summer of 1940, the skies over Europe belonged to the Third Reich. The Luftwaffe, honed to a razor's edge during the Spanish Civil War, and unleashed with devastating effect in the blitzkrieg across Poland and France, was the most feared air arm on the planet. Its pilots were experienced, its tactics were proven, and its aircraft, like the Messerschmitt Bf-109, were world-class. They were the proud inheritors of the legacy of the Red Baron, a new generation of aerial knights who believed themselves invincible. At the core of their doctrine was a powerful and, at the time, well-founded myth that unescorted daylight strategic bombing was an act of tactical suicide. This was not mere propaganda. It was a conclusion drawn from brutal empirical evidence. They had watched firsthand as the Royal Air Force attempted to prove the pre-war theories of air power visionaries like Julio Duhet and Billy Mitchell, who argued that the bomber will always get through. During the Battle of the Heligoland Bight in December 1939, a formation of British Vickers Wellington bombers, themselves considered well-defended, was mercilessly annihilated by German fighters. The lesson seemed clear and unequivocal. A bomber, no matter how well armed, was no match for a dedicated single-seat fighter. Daylight was the hunter's domain, and the bomber was its prey. This belief shaped the very structure and purpose of the Luftwaffe. It was not designed as a strategic defense force. Its primary role was tactical, to serve as the flying artillery for the Wehrmacht. Its Junkers Ju-87 Stukas were precision tools for breaking enemy strongpoints. Its medium bombers, like the Heinkel He-111, were for disrupting enemy supply lines just behind the front. The defense of the Reich itself was a secondary consideration, entrusted to a relatively small number of fighter groups and a formidable network of anti-aircraft artillery, the dreaded Flak. The German High Command, including Hermann Göring himself, saw no need for a massive fleet of long-range heavy bombers like the kind Britain was developing, nor did they anticipate needing a vast, layered air defense system. Their strategy was offensive, predicated on quick, decisive victories on the ground, long before an enemy could project strategic air power over the fatherland. Into this world of confident assumptions and established doctrine, a new player arrived in 1942, the United States 8th Air Force. Based in England, it was an organization born of a uniquely American vision of air power. While the British, scarred by their early losses, had committed to the brutal, inaccurate, but safer strategy of night area bombing, the Americans held fast to a different, almost audacious faith. They believed in precision. They believed that by flying in broad daylight at extreme altitudes, they could use their revolutionary Norden bomb sight to place bombs into the proverbial pickle barrel, destroying specific industrial targets, ball-bearing factories, aircraft engine plants, oil refineries, and thereby surgically dismantling Germany's ability to wage war. This entire strategy, this monumental gamble, rested on the wings of one aircraft, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. The name itself was a piece of marketing genius coined by a Seattle journalist, but it captured the essence of the American doctrine. It was not just a bomber, it was a self-defending fortress. The theory was that by flying in tightly packed combat box formations, the bomber's overlapping fields of machine gun fire would create a protective shield so dense that no fighter could penetrate it. They wouldn't need long-range fighter escorts, which in 1942 did not yet exist, because they would be their own escorts. To the seasoned veterans of the Luftwaffe, this sounded like sheer arrogance, a dangerous fantasy cooked up by armchair generals an ocean away. Their intelligence reports on the new American bomber were patchy and often contradictory. They knew it was big, they knew it had 4 engines, and they knew it was bristling with guns. But the reports underestimated its structural integrity, its high-altitude performance, and most critically, the devastating effectiveness of its defensive armament when multiplied across a large formation. The prevailing myth within the Luftwaffe was that these American fortresses would prove to have walls of glass. They would be slow, clumsy targets, easily picked off by the swift and deadly Focke-Wulf 190s. The Americans, they concluded, were about to learn the same bloody lesson the British had learned 3 years prior. The stakes, therefore, were immense. For the Americans, the success or failure of their entire strategic bombing concept was on the line. For the Germans, it was about defending their industrial heartland and proving once and for all the folly of daylight raids. The antagonist in our story, then, is not a single person or a specific German unit. The true antagonist was a deeply ingrained belief system, a military-industrial hubris that blinded the German leadership to the nature of the enemy they were about to face. They saw the United States as a decadent, internally divided nation of amateurs, a commercial power that lacked the martial spirit and technical discipline of the Reich. They critically misunderstood America's greatest weapon, a weapon far more powerful than any single bomber, its colossal, latent industrial capacity. They saw the first B-17s to arrive over Europe as the enemy's best effort, not as the mere trickle before a tidal wave. They could not conceive of a system that could produce thousands of these complex 4-engine aircraft per year, a system that treated bombers not as handcrafted masterpieces like their own, but as mass-produced commodities, as disposable as bullets. The world of late 1942 was thus perfectly set for a dramatic collision of doctrines. The 8th Air Force began tentatively, with small-scale raids on targets in occupied France and the Netherlands, testing their equipment, training their crews, and refining their tactics. The Luftwaffe fighter wings, the Jagdgeschwader, rose to meet them. The initial clashes were brutal and costly for both sides. The Americans were stunned by the aggression and skill of the German pilots. The Germans were shocked by the sheer toughness of the B-17s. Stories began to filter back to German airbases of bombers absorbing hundreds of cannon and machine gun hits, of planes returning to England with entire sections of their tail shot away, with engines on fire, with dead and wounded crewmen, yet somehow, miraculously, still flying. But these were just stories, battlefield rumors. The German engineering mind, precise and methodical, required more than anecdotes. To truly defeat the fortress, they had to understand it. They had to strip away the myth and get to the mechanical truth. Every downed B-17 was scoured for parts, for clues. But a crashed aircraft is a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. Wreckage could tell them about armor thickness or alloy composition, but it couldn't tell them how the bomber flew with 2 engines out, how the gunners coordinated their fire, or what blind spots a fighter could exploit. They needed a complete blueprint, a user's manual written by the enemy. They needed a teacher. And on December 12, 1942, a young American lieutenant faced with an impossible choice over northern France would unwittingly deliver that teacher directly into their waiting arms. The first domino was about to fall. December 12, 1942. A raw, damp cold clings to the airfields of eastern England. At RAF Molesworth, the ground crews of the 303rd Bombardment Group, nicknamed Hell's Angels, are making final preparations. The men are still relatively new to this war. Their baptism of fire had come less than a month before, and the brutal reality of aerial combat over Europe is only just beginning to supplant the confident optimism they had carried across the Atlantic. Among the 20 B-17s being readied for the day's mission is serial number 4124585, an F-model Fortress. Painted on its nose is the unofficial name given to it by its crew, Wulfe Hound. In the pilot's seat sits Lieutenant Paul Flickinger. His mission, like that of the other 19 crews, is to strike the railroad marshalling yards at Rouen-Sotteville in occupied France. It is a vital artery for the German war machine, a nexus of